listening to the Art of Homeschooling podcast, where we help parents cultivate creativity and connection at home. I'm your host, Jean Miller, and here on this podcast, you'll find stories and inspiration to bring you the confidence you need to make homeschooling work for your family. Let's begin. Fall is fast approaching here, and I don't really want to admit it because I'm not quite ready for summer to be over. But just yesterday, a flock of geese flew overhead heading south. First time this year, and every time I experience that, this poem just pops right into my head. Over the housetops, over the trees, winging their way in a stiff fall breeze, a flock of birds is flying along, singing a song they all like to sing. We'll see you again when it's spring, spring, spring. Today, I'm embracing that fall is on its way, and I invite you to join me. Here in northeastern Ohio, fall means hot apple cider, sweater weather, pumpkins and apples. We have beautiful deciduous trees with leaves changing color into these stunning bright reds, oranges, yellows, and it's such a cozy time of the year. And one of the best ways to get into the season, I think, is with baking. So I thought it would be really fun in this episode to explore some recipes and books that inspire us to do fall baking with kids. Welcome to episode 99. One of the best things about fall baking is the aromatic spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, ginger. Can you smell them? I just conjure them up and I can smell those wonderful warm spices. So I want to share with you some of my family's favorite fall baking, plus a few wonderful books to bring fall joy to you and your children. First, let's talk about apples. We have this wonderful apple tree in our backyard that I often describe to you that overhangs our back deck. And I think of all the things that all summer long I dream about making from those apples. Applesauce, apple crisp, apple pie, apple cake. That's right, there is some delicious fall baking to be had. When I was a little girl, I would walk 2 houses down on our block to Mrs. Griffith's house. She was like the neighborhood grandmother, and she's the one who taught me to bake. I remember learning to roll out the pie dough for an apple pie and taking a teeny tiny little knife to cut out little shapes in the top of the crust. But my very favorite apple dish that I learned to bake with Mrs. Griffith was apple crisp. It's still my favorite. I would say also that apple crisp is probably the easiest to make, as you don't really need a recipe. Just chop up some apples, mix with cinnamon and sugar, create an oat, sugar, cinnamon, butter, flour mix, and sprinkle that on top of your apples in a baking dish. Maybe even add in some chopped nuts and bake until it's done. You know what I'm saying? Keep it easy for yourself and enjoy the experiment of DIY apple crisp. Here are 2 great apple baking books that I just love and want to share with you. The Apple Cake and How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World. What I love about the apple cake is this message of sharing. When an old woman wants to make an apple cake but realizes she doesn't have any apples. This beautiful book is illustrated with soft pastel pictures and even has a recipe in the back for you to make your own apple cake. And then How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World is a great book for exploring where ingredients come from as a little baker searches for the ingredients for her apple pie. The book includes a recipe for apple pie, a beautiful map, and ideas for trying different kinds of apples and even hosting an apple tasting party. Okay, so how could a fall baking conversation be complete without pumpkins? My personal favorite pumpkin baking is pumpkin muffins or pumpkin bread. We often in our family add in chocolate chips for extra fun. That was always my kids' favorite part. They would help to mix in the chocolate chips or nuts. You can also involve children in this recipe by having them, if you're making muffins, having them scoop the batter into the muffin tin. And a super easy way to do this that I still implement today is to use an ice cream scoop. If you've never tried it, I highly encourage you to give it a try, and your kids will love it. And then, of course, there's pumpkin pie with whipped cream. Definitely a family favorite around here. I always had my kids crimp the edges of the crust before baking the shell. And don't forget that all of these recipes I'm mentioning can be made gluten-free or dairy-free with some pretty easy substitutions. You can create or expand any fall baking traditions that have meaning and bring joy to your family. One way to expand on the baking is to include stories or books. Two fall pumpkin books I love are Pumpkin Pumpkin by Jeannie Titherington and Pumpkin Moonshine by Tasha Tudor. In Pumpkin Pumpkin, a young boy plants pumpkin seeds in the spring. Come fall, he harvests his pumpkin and carves it for Halloween, and he saves the seeds to plant again next spring. This book has beautiful pictures in it. Pumpkin Moonshine is all about a girl's adventure finding a pumpkin in a pumpkin patch, trying to get it home, and finally carving it into a jack-o'-lantern. You can't go wrong with pumpkins. I encourage you again to make sure you enjoy fall baking, fall crafts and stories. Find the ones that light you up. Tailor your festivities to what is both doable and inspiring to you. Lastly, baking bread. It's filling, fulfilling, and fun for kids. There are so many lessons to be learned in baking bread. The whole process of kneading, baking, waiting, and then eating fresh made bread hot out of the oven, it really helps children experience a slower pace and learn patience. Making simple, healthy foods like bread and soups is such a nurturing activity to do with our kiddos. Bread baking can also be a great part of homeschool lessons for any age. You can learn about measurement, chemistry, sculpting, health, geography, and even social studies. So 2 things I want to share with you. One is about the Fall Festival of Michaelmas and baking dragon bread. And the other is a great resource for baking bread with children. So Michaelmas is a fall festival celebrated in many Waldorf communities and schools and homeschools about gathering our courage and slaying the dragons in our lives. Here in my family, we call it the Festival of Strength and Courage. And we like to include some fall baking, baking dragon bread, all kinds of fall activities with maybe leaf rubbings and hot apple cider, gathering with friends to celebrate the change of seasons. One of the traditional Michaelmas stories is about a dragon. And around the world, in different Waldorf classrooms, homeschools, co-ops, schools, children bake dragon bread on or close to September 29th each year to celebrate this fall festival. Dragon bread is simply bread shaped like a dragon. You can use any yeasted bread recipe and form your dough into what looks like a dragon on your baking sheet. Then Decorate with slivered almonds for teeth and scales, a raisin for the eye, or children can get creative by cutting spikes out of the dough using scissors for the scales and decorating the dragon however they want with dried fruits, nuts, or seeds. It's a really fun baking activity. In the show notes for this episode, I'll share a few links, including 2 free Michaelmas stories and a short play, all online resources, as well as a few recipes. So please be sure to check the show notes out. You can find them at artofhomeschooling.com/episode 99. You might also want to check out the book, Baking Bread with Children by Lee Cohen. Baking Bread with Children has everything you need to share the magic of baking with children of all ages. The techniques and recipes in this book come with stories, songs, poems, and other activities. Well, there you have it, fall baking ideas. So we've talked about apples, pumpkins, baking bread, and some great book resources. As I said, everything will be linked in the show notes, so don't forget to go to artofhomeschooling.com/episode 99. I hope you enjoy the change of seasons along with all the fun fall baking you can do with your children.
That's all for today, my friend. But here's what I want you to remember. Rather than perfection, let's focus on connection. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Art of Homeschooling podcast.